Hello, hello, everyone. Kimsey here today. I've got another talk for you. Today, we're going to talk about the connection between cortisol and anxiety and how dysregulated cortisol, that means both high and low. High cortisol gets a lot of attention, low and just dysregulated, which I'll explain more about in a minute, does not. And I think it really should. So, hi, everyone. I see some people hopping on. I'm going to let everyone know right now that I am going live. All right. We are going to make this one short and sweet too. I try to make some of these easier for people to just like click on and attend. So for those of you that are hopping on right now, let me know that you're here. Drop a comment. Let me know that you're here. Where are you watching from? Like, where in the world are you watching from? And then if questions come up along the way, make sure to tag me if you're watching live or the replay, and I'll make sure to answer those as we go. Okay, so for those of you that don't know me, my name is Kimsey Berkwin. I'm an integrative nutritionist. I'm also the owner of the Facebook group that I'm going live in right now, which is called Holistic Solutions for Mental Health and Wellness. And I go live every Monday talking about a mental health and integrative mental health topic. So today I'm talking about the connection between dysregulated cortisol levels and anxiety. In my virtual practice, in my online practice, Progressive Health and Wellness, it is a nutrition and wellness practice where we specialize in working with people who are men and women who are ambitious, driven, successful, but they are struggling with their mental health. It could be anxiety, depression, ADD, ADHD, focus, cognition. And we take a root-caused body-mind approach to help restore optimal mental balance, mood, and performance. So in talking about, first, let me talk about what cortisol is and what it does in the body, right? Many people have heard of cortisol. There might be, think of it as the stress hormone, but that may be as far as the understanding goes. So cortisol does many things in the body. It is a it's produced by the adrenal glands. I'm just going to start there. It is produced by the adrenal glands, small little walnut-sized glands that sit on top of the kidneys. Here are a few things that cortisol does. Cortisol is really important for setting our circadian rhythm, which is a diurnal or day-night cycle that every cell in our body is programmed to. So cortisol wakes us up in the morning. Its peak levels are between 6 and 8 in the morning, or really when the sun starts coming up and shining through our eyes. And then it gradually falls throughout the day, reaching its lowest levels at night when it's dark outside so that we can sleep. So it sets the circadian rhythm. It is important for regulating the immune system. So it helps modulate immune activity. In other words, if our body is fighting an infection, cortisol is involved in making sure that inflammatory response, that healthy inflammatory response, doesn't run rampant. You can see this or appreciate the role of cortisol in regulating the immune system when recognizing that cortisol is further converted into cortisone, and that is often used as a medication, right, to dampen the inflammatory response. So regulating the immune system. Cortisol is important for metabolism. So it increases our metabolism. It increases glucose metabolism. So it essentially mobilizes glucose. Of course, we can't have a conversation without cortisol without talking about how it is involved in the stress response, right? It helps us escape, or it helps us respond to stressors, I'll say. Somebody is sharing right now, they just made a comment that they're having an anxiety attack right now. I'm really sorry to hear that. Jody, hi. Just stay with us today. Stay with us and breathe as you're watching this talk, and know that we are here with you today. Just take several slow, deep breaths in, breathing through the belly. Stay connected with us right now. Shoot me a message if you want. We can have a chat after this talk too. I want to make sure that you're okay. Okay, so those are some of the, and then it helps regulate blood pressure too. So, ha, wait, drop a comment, drop a like if you have ever stood up and you get a little dizzy. That is called orthostatic hypotension. Cortisol is involved in adjusting our blood pressure when we go from seated or lying to standing. And if our blood pressure doesn't increase appropriately, then we get dizzy. So, all right, those are some of the roles of cortisol. Now, let's talk about how this can connect to anxiety. And then I'm going to let's talk about what causes cortisol dysregulation. That will lead us into the different ways that it connects to anxiety. And then we'll talk about how kind of our integrative approach to optimizing cortisol balance, regaining cortisol balance. Okay, so cortisol gets a lot of attention. Most people have probably heard of adrenal fatigue. And I'm going to talk about why adrenal fatigue is really a myth. That's not really what happens. So, cortisol, um, cortisol levels become chronically imbalanced as a result of a problem. So cortisol, cortisol will respond to any kind of stress. And this is really important to know that the body really has one stress response mechanism, right? So the body really doesn't know the difference between eating a food that you're sensitive to, or having an infection, or having an argument with your spouse, right? Hormonally speaking, or having hypoglycemia, or a deficiency in key nutrients that are really important for nervous system regulation. Like, the body doesn't know the difference. So cortisol will respond, generally speaking, when there is a problem, obviously outside of that normal circadian curve that happens. So, or a change to our physiology, we'll say. So, when this happens chronically, for example, somebody that's eating a poor diet, maybe they're drinking high amounts of caffeine, they aren't prioritizing or getting enough sleep, they have a sickness or some kind of infection, they have a job that they don't like, they lack meaning and purpose in their life, maybe they're lonely, maybe they smoke cigarettes, they drink sodas, like, right, there's so many different kinds of stress, but all of those things are impacts to our nervous system and impacts to our cortisol levels. So, acute stress, the body is designed to handle. Chronic stress like that, it is not designed to handle. So, the narrative of adrenal fatigue, again, the adrenal glands produce cortisol. The narrative of adrenal fatigue is that from chronic stress and chronic elevation of cortisol, the adrenal glands can't keep up with that demand. They fatigue, and then cortisol levels fall, and the person enters the exhaustion phase. Here's why that's not what really happens. First of all, there isn't this like pool of DHEA, is the precursor to cortisol. There's not this like pool of DHEA in the adrenal glands. And when that pool runs dry, the adrenal glands can't produce cortisol anymore. That's not how the system works. What's really happening is more nuanced than that. And somebody just asked a question, Davila. Hi, Davila. Talking about how, your daughter has that orthostatic issue. Does that mean she has high cortisol levels? Not necessarily. This can be connected to, again, just imbalanced cortisol levels. If anything, maybe low at the time that it happens, which is why the blood pressure is not responding well. But if she is has lower blood sugar at that time, maybe didn't sleep well, there could be nutrient imbalances or even thyroid imbalances. There can be other things to that, but ultimately cortisol can be playing a role. So it's not just like, orthostatic high or low cortisol necessarily. I would look for the underlying factor, which is actually where I'm going next. So I was talking about the nuanced approach to adrenal fatigue. It's called cortisol resistance. So the pituitary gland in the brain is constantly sensing cortisol levels and helping to set and maintain that circadian rhythm. And just like any hormone, if there's excessive amounts chronically, again, I keep saying chronically, if there's excessive amounts chronically, the pituitary can become desensitized and no longer adequately regulate that system, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal or HPA system. And when that happens, now we get these imbalanced levels of cortisol, where it could be low in the morning and high at night, or it's high in the morning and then it comes down and then it ramps back up and then it comes back down. But any variation that is not that diurnal pattern would be considered dysregulated. Maybe it's spiking at 3 in the morning. Hello, anybody that's woken up at 3 in the morning with racing thoughts and can't go back to sleep could be high cortisol. I hate to say this, but it could also be low cortisol, because if cortisol is too low, our body will release adrenaline instead. So going back to the fact that cortisol is a response to some kind of imbalance. So if cortisol levels are dysregulated, we have to figure out why, right? Is it a chemical stressor, physical stressor, emotional stressor? Usually it's a combination of all three. And this is why I don't even bother with running cortisol level tests, like a salivary test or a urinary test from the Dutch test. I don't even bother testing people's cortisol levels at the beginning of our process, because like we have so much work to do. I test them later once we've really laid a strong foundation and we've optimized nutrition and gut health and nutrient density and breath work and nervous system regulation and all of those things. Because here's the thing, if you don't leave with anything else from this talk besides this one thing, this is what I want you to leave with. You can't just take a supplement to address your cortisol levels, right? You have to tap into your physiology. Taking a supplement to lower cortisol because you think you have high cortisol, even if cortisol is high, it's like the firefighters come into your home because your home is on fire, and you just tell them, thanks, no, we're okay, you can go home, and your house is like burning behind you, right? You got to put out the fire. You got to put out the fire first, and then you can tell the firefighters to go home. So, okay, nonetheless, I'm off my soapbox here about adrenal fatigue and the problem with just like taking supplements to lower your cortisol levels, like taking adaptogens. Okay, so going back now, how does cortisol connect to anxiety? Here are 6 different ways, and I took some notes, so I'm going to read what I wrote. Here are 6 different ways. 1, it depletes key nutrients like magnesium, zinc, vitamin C, and B vitamins. These are all really important for nourishing our nervous system, influencing how we respond to and recover from stress. Also, those nutrients are really important for our neurochemistry, and so therefore depletions leave us prone to anxiety, depression, ADD, etc. It disrupts the immune system. Chronic stress and trauma initiate what's called the cell danger response, leading to also chronic inflammation, metabolic dysfunction, which then in a vicious cycle further disrupts cortisol levels. Here's something interesting. Immune cells have receptors, like white blood cells have receptors for cortisol on them. And again, cells can become resistant to chronic elevations of a hormone. So if the white blood cells are becoming resistant to cortisol because it's chronically elevated from other forms of chronic stress, then it can't regulate the immune system appropriately, and that allows inflammation to run rampant. Number 3, it disrupts our neurochemistry. Specifically, it disrupts our GABA levels, and GABA is our primary inhibitory or calming anxiolytic neurochemical. So does wine relax you? Does marijuana relax you? Those both increase GABA levels. And so that can be a sign that, like, do you like to have a drink in the evening, just like take the edge off? That can be a sign of lower GABA levels. It disrupts sleep and sleep quality. So Cortisol and melatonin have an inverse relationship with each other. If cortisol's high, melatonin's low. If melatonin's high, cortisol's supposed to be low. So if you're like running on all engines on during the day, that can disrupt our sleep. If you have chronic inflammation, that can disrupt your sleep. And then again, it becomes that vicious cycle. Because if you're not running on rest and relaxation with good quality sleep, you're running on stress hormones and your cortisol levels will be imbalanced the next day. It affects the microbiome and the gut lining. So chronically dysregulated or imbalanced cortisol levels can contribute to less diversity in our microbiome. It leaves us prone to opportunistic overgrowth or dysbiosis, and it degrades the integrity of the intestinal lining, which, as we know from other talks I've given, predisposes us to other issues, other chronic inflammation, autoimmune, etc. And then lastly, it actually lowers progesterone levels in women. So women, do you have painful periods? Has the transition into menopause been horrific? Do you struggle with fertility? Do you get PMS around your menstrual cycle, heavy cramping? All possible signs of low progesterone. Biggest culprit behind that is cortisol dysregulation. The reason being is because, like, hormonally speaking, if your body thinks that you're running from a lion, it's probably not a great time to get pregnant, right? So it'll lower progesterone in compensation. Okay, so now and I want to make this really clear when people ask what are the causes of dysregulated cortisol. Any form of stress, right? Infection, blood sugar swings, poor diet, nutrient deficiency, emotional stress, obviously, any form, injuries, any form of stress can affect cortisol levels chronically, right? You get a cold, not really, but if you have a chronic low-grade infection, possibly. Okay, so here are a few things that you can do for it. And so in my practice, we do often test cortisol levels. I love salivary. I love the Dutch cortisol test, which is a dried urine test. Really valuable to see what that diurnal rhythm looks like. I do test it. But we take a really holistic approach and we work with nervous system regulation. We work with all of those things, like fixing the roots of those imbalances. But with that said, here are some things that you can do too. Okay, one, exposure. Go outside for like 10 to 15 minutes in the morning, between 6 and 8 in the morning, and at dusk, because exposure to that red light frequency really helps prime our circadian rhythm in the brain. So that is really helpful. And at the like peak sunlight hours, so like between 12 and 2, for example, really, really helpful. Limit blue light exposure. Oh my God, are those fireworks? I don't know why that just happened. That's kind of fun. I hope you guys could see that. Limit blue light exposure at least 2 hours before bed. So dim the lights, read with a red light, don't stare at your phone for too long, because that reduces melatonin levels and that will increase cortisol. Consider adding a pinch of like Himalayan pink salt to your water once in the morning and once afternoon. Cortisol responds to sodium intake. So we actually need healthy sodium levels for proper cortisol levels. So that can be really helpful. Exercise is wonderful. So even you don't have to focus on intensity, just any kind of movement outdoors is even better because of the sunlight and the fresh air and the negative ions and everything I mentioned before. And then also, I'm going to provide several other tips in my post tomorrow. So check back tomorrow for this too. But consider supplementation. So I like phosphatidylserine if cortisol is truly elevated. I like You can consider, magnesium glycinate, really nourishing for the nervous system, helps with anxiety, sleep, stress, overwhelm. Minerals, like adding in, I love trace elements, minerals, trace minerals. They have a mineral drops you can add into your water throughout the day and eat. Oh, yeah. And then consider adaptogens too, like rhodiola and ashwagandha and lemon balm. I love mushrooms too, like lion's mane or chaga. All of those can be really helpful for helping your body adapt to stress. All right, everyone. So, if you are watching this and you're really suspicious that cortisol may be involved in your anxiety, like if if you feel chronically stressed, overwhelmed, more reactive than you want to be, less tolerant, you just don't have any reserves left, if you have like signs of low progesterone, drop a comment here. We can set up a free 15-minute discovery call and talk more about what the process would look like for helping you finally get answers as to what's affecting your mental health and start a plan. All right, everyone. Great being here today. Thanks so much. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.